Hello and welcome back to the Regional Championship 8 here at Sydney, Australia. I'm Jim Dowling, joined by Lee Hung Nguyen. How did you go last round? I saw you had some Boros Energy, some Demir Murktide going on.
Yeah, we had a good old mid-range Murktide, no Oculus, just a good old classic control with some frogs. And we had Boros Energy doing their thing, just lots of flages, lots of surveilling.
That deck just does a lot of stuff.
It does. It's just so much coming on, so much going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I'm surprised we haven't seen a Breach deck yet today.
Yeah, right. There is a lot of Breach. I've been walking around scouting the room. Obviously, there's an open deck list tournament. But yeah, there is a lot of Breach. There is a lot of Eldrazi spawns going around. Alrighty, we're going to round 3 now. I'm pretty excited to see this matchup. We have Deane on Gruul Eldrazi and Gia here on Esper Control.
Yeah, Eldrazi is sort of one of the big players of the metagame at the moment, I would say. But Esper Control, we see players from time to time picking up a controlling pile of cards, removal spell, interaction, all the way. But it's not sort of the deck to beat for the weekend by any means.
True. And I'm not sure, what do you mean by interaction? I'm just kidding.
Well, we're going to see a lot of discard spells, removal spells, perhaps some counter spells, of course. And these players have open deck lists, so they know exactly what they're expecting from the other player as well.
Yeah, right. And they are both 2-0 in this 8-round regional championships tournament. So pretty excited to see some of these, some players that are on their hot streak, playing really well and getting to feature on the feature match.
It's a good experience. It's not one that we've had much of in Australia, having a feature table and the ability to broadcast these games and look back at them afterwards and see, hey, maybe I could have done this better. Maybe I should have mulliganed or kept this hand instead, as we do see Gia here taking a mulligan.
Yeah, right.
What would you be looking for in your opening hand in the Esper Control seat against an Eldrazi player?
I mean, I think with the type of Eldrazi hands that you would get, right, you are trying to basically stop anything that is a massive payoff, right? Because the Esper Control, the way he's playing this deck is that it's kind of like value because I have good cards. You have counter spells, you have Tamio, you have Ketramos. He's really trying to take advantage of things like Ketramos, and I believe Psychic Frog is also in the deck, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Good combo. You get to give it flying and you get a free card back.
Yeah, we see the main deck Relic of Progenitus as well for Esper. For Gia here, looking to draw some cards with Ketramos with that and get it online a little bit faster. Now, the one thing I'm noticing here, if I was looking at mulligans for this deck, I'd be wanting to find Thoughtseize.
Thoughtseize, yes. You definitely want to strip their hand with the big payoffs, right? And I think Gia is playing a real I am trying to get lots of value, lots of 2-for-1s for you, just because Ketramos is the new hotness in the format, and we haven't had Black-White Blink yet on the stream, but yeah, Ketramos is definitely worth trying to splash for.
Absolutely. So we're off here, turn 1, Gia playing a Undercity Sewers, surveilling a Fatal Push into the graveyard, and Joe playing his own surveil land here, Commercial District.
I mean, in this kind of matchup, it's open deck list, right? You kind of just know, so you just go, might as well surveil that push. You know that you don't need it if you know. All right, we've got a turn 2 Psychic Frog here from Gia.
Yeah, really putting the clock on from the early turns here, and that's another way to sort of turn any fatal pushes that you might have had in your opening hand into some more value on the battlefield. Grow this Psychic Frog.
Yeah, definitely.
Shorten the clock. Because if you take your time against this Eldrazi deck, they're going to start casting a lot of spells, and it doesn't matter whether those spells resolve, they're going to have their triggered abilities that are going to happen regardless.
Yeah, the Gruul Eldrazi deck is definitely going really heavy on I'm going 3 CMC and higher, right? You got things like main deck Kozilek's Return, you have Rising Chrysalis, you have Sowing. You definitely are going really big.
And of course, Kozilek's Command, the sort of fix any situation. There's nothing this card can't do. It slices and dices.
Yeah, it's my true love in this format because Kozilek Command is the best.
Now, I don't see any colorless sources on Joe's battlefield right now. We did see a Talisman come down and eat a Prismatic Ending, but there isn't any way to make colorless so far.
Wow, this is very aggressive here from Gia. Gia is force negating the Utopia Sprawl. So Joe starting off with the opener of I'm going to Utopia Sprawl my forest, and Gia just straight up force negation, pitching a Consider. What do you think he's trying to play there?
Look, he's just trying to end this game as soon as he can, Joe is all about the more mana sources Joe has in play, the more of his deck he has access to. He has a deck with 7 costs and 13 costs and X costs. So having access to more mana is just going to let you play these busted cards. We see here a Kozilek's Command in hand, Worldbreaker, Kozilek's Return, Writhing Chrysalis, and Sowing Mycospawn.
Yeah, definitely massive heads-up play there from Gia, because he's just... He's got the frog in play, and he's just stripping his hand.
And you can see here as well, Prismatic Ending on that Talisman and Force of Negation on that Utopia Sprawl. There's no 4th land now to play the Sowing Mycospawn or the Writhing Chrysalis.
Yes, right. And there's no color sources, like you said earlier, where he's going to be able to make a spawn token and try to get to 4 mana or 5 mana, because that's Sowing Mycospawn. He might even top deck, but he needs... his deck is currently... I mean, he has the Kozilek's Return, but it's not really doing much at the moment. But yeah, he's definitely trying to get to 4 mana. You could say that.
Yeah, definitely. And if you could get that Mycospawn down, of course, that's going to search out another land.
Yep.
That said, the Writhing Chrysalis also makes 2 colorless spawns when it enters. So Gia choosing to take that one with the Thoughtseize here.
Yeah, and do you think Gia is really concerned too much about his own life total at the moment?
Not particularly. I think this Eldrazi deck, if it's going to hit you, it's going to hit you for chunks of 5 or 10 or 13. It's not going to be nickel and diming in for 2 and 3 here and there. So you can pretty safely spend the mana if you can stop your opponent from progressing their board state instead.
Yeah, definitely my style of deck. The way if you come to Magic, I just love to cast threats and be like, you deal with this, I'm going to attack with my big baddie. All right, Kozilek's Return here. And I believe it does 2 damage.
It does 2 damage to all creatures, yeah. That is an instant, though.
Right.
So I'm not certain why it was played on the main phase instead of perhaps after combat on Gia's turn. It does mean that this counter is on for this combat step.
Right. I guess he's trying to make him discard a card. Psychic Frog, a very, very powerful card that has oftenly taken over the game.
Yeah, look, if this card gets going, it's very hard to stop it. If you can get it going and get it going on turn 2, maybe pitch a card, maybe mess with your opponent's hand a little bit. You can't even come up the board and stop it getting in that way. It's gonna jump over your creatures with flying, and it's drawing a card for Gia every single turn here. I believe this is the 5th hit for this card, perhaps.
Yeah, right. And
which is
ideal tempo, ideal control player sort of line for Gia here.
I see a counter spell in hand for Gia, as well as I think that's actually 2 counter spells on a Force of Negation.
Wow.
Committing a Tamiyo to the board here. I mean, that's the thing. If you're going to answer the Psychic Frog, then the Tamiyo can be a sweet backup plan. That said, I don't think there's that much 1-for-1 removal you're looking at in the Gruul deck, especially not with this much mana.
Yeah, they're definitely trying to go over the top, right? And Joe's still stuck on 3 lands, unfortunately, and Gia has played at least 13,000 considers and drawn 1 million cards from this frog. So definitely a good definition of taking over the game.
You really can't blame Joe for this keep, though. It had 3 lands. It had a couple of extra mana sources in that Utopia Sprawl and the Talisman. And if just one of those stuck around, then you start casting your Sowing Mycospawn, you get another land out of your deck. You start casting your Writhing Chrysalis, and you get a couple of spawns. And then suddenly you've got access to your entire hand. The fact that Gia was able to answer both of those cards is really the defining moment of this game.
I love how the Ketramos just gets summoned. This is just this is next level. And he knows everything resolves.
Yeah.
All his lines are very transparent.
That's right. There's no permission coming in from the other deck here. And Ketramos extremely good with Psychic Frog. The ability to just exile cards from your graveyard on your turn, draw cards, perhaps get that Ketramos ready to get into the red zone as soon as next turn.
Right. He's doing the combo now. The synergy, sorry. You exile 3 cards, you draw a card, you lose a life, but then you draw an extra card from the frog. And Tamiyo, she's somewhat going to flip as well.
Yeah, Tamiyo really just fits in so well in this Ketramos, this Psychic Frog. You don't think of them as super powered draw engines that are going to draw 1 billion cards in a turn, but you don't need to draw that many for Tamiyo. You just need to draw 2 additional to go with your draw step.
And what happens when you draw too many cards?
The Tamiyo transforms, and then it starts to really put a clock on your opponent.
Yeah, you just discard them all to the frog.
Well, I mean, that too. I don't think we're going to see a lethal attack this turn here, but next turn, especially with the Ketramos threatening to come in as well.
Amazing.
That Ketramos is certainly online at this point. The entire graveyard. I think that frog has been activated to exile 3 cards 3 times this turn.
Yeah, I mean, he is getting so much value here.
And we're still going. We're still discarding cards. We're still drawing cards here. Wow.
Alrighty, yeah. I'm going to go ahead and pull up this ridiculous card here, Ketramos.
So finally we're seeing the Psychic Frog into the red zone. That is crashing in for 7 damage. And of course that means you're going to draw another card as well. We've got this Tameo here for insurance if something was to happen to this frog. But I think we're going to see Joe moving to the next game here very quickly. Malevolent Rumble, a counterspell for good measure out of GR.
Yep.
And that's it. We're going to sideboarding.
He's like, counterspell just to be sure. But
I think this game went exactly as GR wanted it to.
100%, yeah.
I don't think Joe really had much of a say in that game. And that was a mulligan to 6 for GR, right?
I mean, from my perspective, as someone that plays a lot of Eldrazi, Joe had a great hand. He had a Utopia Sprawl, he had a Mana Rock, and he had payoffs, right? He had things to do. It's just that he had, because it's open deck list, Geo was able to just, surveil a dead card, right? Put the Fatal Push in the graveyard, which is useless. I mean, not useless, it's just not great in this matchup. And then also as well, hitting the Mana Rock with a Prismatic Ending. That was such a big deal for Joe.
And then following that up with the Force on the Utopia Sprawl as well to really just say, no extra mana for you. We're going to play 1 land per turn.
Heads up play, very heads up play. That's good stuff. But yeah, so looking into sideboards here, I think, I'm assuming Joe's going to be on the play here. What kind of answers do you think Joe's going to be bringing in?
Joe doesn't have much for controlling strategies. That said, Psychic Frog is a big player in the metagame, and you can sort of have answers specifically for that. Less so for the counterspells, and I think the reason that Joe doesn't have anything for counterspell decks is because all of his cards already have cast triggers. We don't need to go heavy on cards to beat control. As long as you can stop them getting off to a fast start with a card like Frog. We're going to be looking at perhaps the extra Writhing Chrysalis coming in. I don't see much here in the way of passive graveyard hate. But yeah, if we can stop a frog getting off too early and have an answer for Ketramos, which may just be gumming up the ground with something like a World Breaker. But I'm not expecting to see too much in from the sideboard here for Joe.
Yeah, honestly, I think you're right. Like, I think his deck is there to kind of attack the Boros decks, right? You have Kozilek's Return Remain, you have the Khans to beat the Breach decks, but Esper Control is kind of like, I've seen this list on Magic Online, and they kind of come out of nowhere. It's not very common, but it still exists. People are just playing good cards.
As for Gia's sideboard, I see a big 4 next to the card Consigned to Memory. That card is tailor-made for the Eldrazi matchup. It came out in Modern Horizons 3, of course, with a whole bunch of the Eldrazi support, which has made Joe's deck the deck that it is today.
Do you think Gia here is probably going to bring in anything like Stony Silence? I know that there's a potential chance that
Yeah, I would be surprised to see Stony Silence or Exercise. Consigned to Memory and Thoughtseize would be the 2 that I would expect to see any more copies of. And we do see a Thoughtseize in Gia's hand here today. Turn 1, Fetch Land Go for Joe, and Watery Grave Thoughtseize for Gia. We get all the information. Let's see it.
Alrighty. Emrakul.
I see Eldrazi Temple, 2 fetch lands, Emrakul the Promised End, a Kozilek's Return, and a Writhing Chrysalis.
Yeah, I don't think you're seeing much land destruction in the meta as of lately, so keeping this 4-land hand is actually fine. And he has a turn 3 Chrysalis, but he's going to take the Chrysalis anyway.
Leaving Joe with just a Kozilek's Return and some lands, and an Emrakul, of course, but that one's not going to be relevant for... we'll check back in on that in 4 or 5 turns here.
Yeah, I think the good thing here is that I don't think G is going to potentially attack Joe's graveyard at all. I don't think there's any reason for him to need or want to do that. So potentially, hopefully, Joe can get this Emrakul eventually online.
And Gia did know that the Emrakul was in the Eldrazi list. Again, we keep harping on it, but this open deck list system means that Gia knows that there is 3 Emrakul, the Promised End, coming out of Joe's deck.
Yeah. Definitely trying to beat up on those black-white blink decks, right?
So we see here Joe playing Utopia Sprawl onto the Surveil land that was fetched at the end of turn, and playing
A Stomping Grounds.
Stomping Grounds, thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't actually recognize that one. I haven't seen it in the old border before.
Yeah, retro art, yeah. The thing is, like, I guess he's got no 2-drops. He's got no Rumble in his hand. He doesn't need to, like, play the green source and, you know, put the Utopia Explorer. That's usually the play pattern, right? You enchant the other land and then you can have 2 mana up.
So this is actually giving access to 5 mana this turn here for Joe, as we may see this Eldrazi Temple come down.
I wonder... Oh, it's a bog.
It's a bog.
Bajuka bog. Oh, I love that card.
Spicy.
But it means that he's still like kind of, he doesn't have any threats, right? Gia's still stuck on 1 land.
Yeah, you've got to imagine that this hand is full of permission spells at this point, right?
Yeah, but you need 2 mana for the counter spell.
Yeah, but perhaps a Spell Snap, a Spell Pierce, Stern Scolding, Consign to Memory. Lots of 1 mana options here for control decks these days.
Consign, I can see. Like, you know, you can just hit nearly every card in the deck, right? But you need that second land. And I think Gia's potentially... Yeah, he's got the second land now. He's going to go ahead and shock this. And he doesn't really care about his own life total at the moment. Eldrazi, like you said, if they're going to pack a punch, they pack a punch, right? But right now, there's a relic. Okay, he is respecting the Emrakul.
Those relics were in the main deck.
Oh, okay.
Very good against Ketramos. Sorry, with your own Ketramos, I should say.
True.
And against other metagame players, perhaps these Hollow 1 decks running around. And, of course, Breach, which we'll be seeing some of later. Ugin's Labyrinth, the land of choice here for Joe. Putting that Emrakul behind it. You know, I think we've seen every card that Joe has drawn the last few turns.
I mean, that's how Eldrazi players do, right?
Yeah, we had the Thoughtseize, and then Joe was like, okay, I drew Utopia Sprawl. All right, and now I drew Bajuka Bog, and this turn I drew Ugin's Labyrinth. So we could actually rattle off the contents of Joe's hand here. It may be, Kozilek's Return and the Stomping Grounds.
Right. Did he play the Stomping Grounds already?
He had 2, and the Eldrazi Temple being.
Oh, the Temple, yeah. We know the Temple's still in his hand as well. It's kind of, and he still has the Promised End, but that's gone under.
That's now under the Labyrinth, which protects it from any further Thoughtseizes that Gia might have access to. Very cool. Ability to sort of hide that away, re-add it to hand on a future turn here from this Ugin's Labyrinth.
He also can potentially consign the trigger, right? Oh, is it triggered ability? No, it's triggered ability, not activated ability.
That's right.
Yeah, gotcha. Can't consign the activation there, but yeah, I'm just kind of we're peeking at Gia's hand here. I can see a lot of reactions. He's got a lot of permission spells gotten ready and on the go, right?
I mean, Gia spent this turn filtering and making sure that the future turns are going to be good. There was a Consider and a Surveil land, and we see a fetch land here as well. So Gia's no longer worried about low resources. Has access to all the mana that he needs to. We see an Unearth here targeting Psychic Frog, which I believe was put in the graveyard from a Consider or the Undercity Sewers, one of those 2 on the previous turn.
Yeah. I mean, this is, like, in a way, like, Joe has played all this mana. He's gone really big, but then nothing has happened. Okay, there is the Frog, so he's trying to make him discard a card at instant speed. And he's going to buff the Frog here at end step. But, like, this is kind of where Gia wants to be. Joe's got all the mana, but he hasn't done anything. So I'm trying to understand, like, you know, they're both kind of trying to go big. But Gia's like, longer this goes, the better it is for me.
You've got to wonder, did Gia keep track of the cards that Joe had in hand as well? Does Gia know that the hand is Stomping Ground, Eldrazi Temple, and this here Utopia Sprawl? That said, even with no cards in the graveyard here, we're getting pretty big on the mana here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus Utopia Sprawl is 6, 7. Stomping Ground is 8, and then the Ugin's Labyrinth can tap for 1 or 2, depending on whether you get that Emrakul back out from under it. So even with no cards in the graveyard, we're getting close to this Emrakul.
Getting close, but he has to bring the Emrakul back in his hand. So it's going to turn the Labyrinth into 2 mana to 1. He also only has 1 card in graveyard. So, yeah, it's 13 mana and he gets reduced down, right? Yeah, so what he needs right now, actually, is Joe needs a Kozilek's Command. I mean, yes, it's only going to...
That's true on any turn for this deck.
That's true. I just love that card so much. Because he needs to deal with this frog. And, you know, it's hard to kill a frog with, like, damage, red-based damage, because he just discards cards to it, right? Also, the other thing is, Gia is a permissions-type deck. So you want to really be playing on your end step.
We see here another Relic of Progenitus here for Gia. Coming down here, and that's going to strip this Kozilek's Return from the graveyard. So even the uncounterable 5 damage sort of flashback-esque trigger from that card not going to happen. And a Thoughtseize coming down, revealing, was that another Eldrazi Temple in
It was
hand?
a Ghost Quarter.
A Ghost Quarter.
So
Not
Joe,
what you want for this matchup.
Joe had no lands game 1. I mean, he got counterspelled by a bunch of things and removed. And now he is flooded. He is flooded so much.
Yeah, definitely. Drawing 2 Utopia Sprawls, a Bog, and this Ghost Quarter off the top, and this Ugin's Labyrinth. That said, the Ugin's Labyrinth did manage to protect the Emrakul from the Thoughtseize.
That's good. Heads up play there, Joe. Heads up play there.
I think I saw a big card drawn for turn here by Joe. If I'm not mistaken, we might be breaking the world here in a second.
Did you say World Breaker?
I think so. That looks like 7 mana being tapped.
It is a World Breaker.
World Breaker.
Target your blue-black land.
Wow. So this is a cast trigger.
It is.
Which A means that it normally beats counterspells, and B means that it falls perfectly victim to Consign to Memory, countering the color spell and also paying the additional 1 to counter the triggered ability.
This card has changed lots of Magic. Like, it is so strong.
It is, as I said, it's tailor-made. You know, coming out in the same set as Ugin's Labyrinth, Planar Nexus, Sowing Micah Spawn, Writhing Chrysalis. You know, all of these cards came out in the same set as this Consigned to Memory, just to make sure that this card wasn't too powerful. And we do see activating the second ability on World Breaker here to sacrifice a land.
I love that ability. A lot of people forget that World Breaker can be returned to your hand by sacking a land. And like once you play the Bog, you don't really need it anymore, right? Joe has 1,000,000 mana. So yeah, you just pay a colorless and 2 mana, sack a land, and then you return it back at instant speed. And you cast it again.
So even though you managed to consign to memory the first one, will you be able to consign to memory the second one?
Yeah, that's a good point.
What about the third one?
The third one? It's a good point.
And this means that every land drawn off the top here for Joe is another World Breaker.
True. At instant speed, right? You just do it at end step. The crazy thing about World Breaker is it has hidden text. The reach is very hard to read. Ooh. It's not at the top of the cards, and people forget about it often. All right, so Gia here is, he's just getting his board. He's carving his hand. He's got a Tameo in play.
And this Tameo, it was cast this turn, and it's transforming straight away. The Psychic Frog drawing a card, and this Consider post-combat drawing a card. So really, this Tameo doesn't take that long to transform. All you need is a couple of effects, and you're off to the races with it.
I believe he should have a clue token, right? Oh, no, it didn't.
Attack with the
It didn't even attack. Yeah, it just came in, right? I was thinking, like, where are we in this game state?
So fast.
So fast. All right, so Joe still has 13,000 mana, and he's tapping lots of mana. I think there's another World Breaker, right?
That looks like 6 mana.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Sure.
Ah, sorry.
Sowing Micah Spawn.
We're going to kick, and we're going to exile a land. He's going to exile the open blue-black source.
And search out another land as well?
Definitely, yeah. I think he... what kind of answers could he get with the Sowing Micah Spawn? I mean, Modern has a plethora of type of lands that you could get, but... potentially, if he wants to keep chaining these, he can get a Sanctum of Ugin, he can get a Cavern of Souls, probably another Temple. It depends on the context of his hand, but yeah, that's probably why there's a one-off Bog in there, in case you want to just exile a graveyard. Yeah,
that makes sense. I would be expecting the Cavern of Souls here, I think. The Consigned to Memory out of Gio's deck, and especially knowing that there's 4 of them in the sideboard, not just 1 or 2, the full play set of 4. You've seen 1 in the graveyard. This Tameo has the ability to get some of them back as well. Counterspells are very important in this matchup here right now. For
sure. Yeah, he's going to go ahead and do that search trigger here. Do you think the Ghost Quarter's in the deck for Tron? Kind of feels like a wasteland. Yeah, you're right. He got it covered.
It's a main deckable colorless source that has words against the mirror matchup against Tron. And you could even just find an opponent that runs 1 or 0 basics. We saw a matchup before, actually, where a player only had 1 basic in their main deck, where the Ghost Quarter could actually just take out a non-basic for free.
It also takes out basics, the thing is. Like,
True, very
a lot of
true.
people would be ghost quartering the Utopia Sprawl land. So you put all your things on a basic thinking it's safe, and then bam, ghost quarter's there.
You see the Philia decks that we may see later on in the Orzhov decks, blinking the White Orchard Phantom, and really testing how many basics the opponent has.
I hate that card. I hate White Orchid so much. And that's first strike and flying. Why?
So we see GR fetching here in the end step, grabbing a Undercity Sewers, getting a Surveil here, choosing to leave it on top, so it must be a good card. What do we see here? That looks like another Consigned to Memory.
You know what's quite interesting? Maybe, I think potentially the white is actually just a splash here, because I haven't seen much white cards in this game.
We saw the Prismatic Ending in the first game and the Ketramos, and that's actually all of the white cards that are in the main deck.
Gotcha.
The rest of it is in the sideboard.
So they do have good sideboard cards. Okay, so Gia here has lost a bit of life, but I think that's not too bad for now. And he thought sees the Wall Breaker back into the graveyard.
Okay.
And imagine the play line here that Joe is just going to bring it back again.
Well, can we count up? Is this Emrakul here yet? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 from the Labyrinth, not a second mana. 9,
like 10.
And 1 in the graveyard?
Yeah, but then the Wall Breaker's going to come back. Oh, you think you're just bringing back the Emrakul, right?
Yeah.
True. Oh, this
So
spell
still
snare.
not quite there.
Even that, like, let's say he does cast the Emrakul. I think by that time, Gia is probably just going to find another consign.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I think there was actually one taken off the Surveil land there. I mean, the Cavern of Souls, though, like you counter the extra ability, the mind control ability, but you wouldn't counter the extra turn. You wouldn't counter the 13/13.
Correct, yeah. And it has flying trample protection from instants, which instants kind of, I think in an Esper deck, you have a lot of instants.
You mentioned that the reach on the World Breaker is a little bit hidden. Do you think the flying on the Emrakul is hidden, or have we internalized that one?
I think people know it has flying. I don't know if everyone knows it has trample.
That's true. You may be right there.
Yeah.
I see a second frog coming down here. They're not so good in multiples. Like, if you can get them through and be drawing cards with them, great, but you don't have the ability to grow both of them very easily.
Yeah, I'm surprised Joe hasn't actually drawn any Kozilek's Return, because with the Wall Breaker looping, Kozilek's Return gets really good.
So Gia here reading World Breaker, making sure that he understands how that card works. And we see here the Ghost Quarter sacrificed. I think that Relic of Progenitus was tapped, not sacrificed here. And Joe choosing to exile the World Breaker instead of the Ghost Quarter.
So what, as a judge, Jim, like what happens there? So like you sacked the Ghost Quarter. Wouldn't the Ghost Quarter and the Wall Breaker be in the graveyard then?
That is true, and you would have the choice of which of the two to exile. It's possible Joe didn't realize that. It's possible that Joe decided that maybe the land would be a stickier type in the graveyard for Emrakul or something along those lines.
Yeah, it's very handy that you're a judge. You know these rules.
I'll tell you what, though, this Sowing Mycospawn, only a 3/3 in play. You know, it's already done its fancy deal of exiling a land and searching out another land. But once it's just in play, it's a little bit anemic here. Attacking into this Psychic Frog, and Gia does have the ability to sort of discard a couple of cards, and we see this Unearth, Counterspell, both discarded. Gia all in on this one Consigned to Memory in hand to put this Sowing Mycospawn in the graveyard.
Right. And it's always awkward when you're trying to attack against a Psychic Frog, because it just keeps getting bigger.
Yeah, they really control how the combat step works at that point, you know?
Yep.
A third Utopia Sprawl here for Joe. Gia may have to just crack this Relic of Progenitus, it seems.
And I believe, I'm assuming Tamio probably also ticked up last turn, making it weaker.
I think last turn was a tick down, perhaps.
Right. Okay.
Tamio up to 3 loyalty now. Frog's coming over for 7 total, putting Joe down to 4. Certainly saying, okay, you've got this turn to do something. Good luck. What can you do? What do you got? It is impressive to look at the number of Utopia Sprawls here that Joe's managed to draw. 3 of them. consider here for Gia as well.
The frog's just taking over, mate.
And we do see the Emrakul added to hand during the end step here. Counting up the mana.
You have creature and land.
And we see, this looks like during your draw step, perhaps? Yeah, counting up the mana, seeing whether cracking this Relic of Progenitus is the right play.
Potentially top deck that Orange Chant.
That would be juicy, and is cracking the Relic of Progenitus, which does hurt the Psychic Frog.
And the Emrakuls.
But the Emrakul, definitely,
Yeah.
Knowing that the Emrakul is in hand here, let's see what we've got access to.
Probably another top deck sowing or something. Oh no, Writhing Chrysalis.
Writhing Chrysalis. So making a couple of blockers here, and that Relic, again, removing that graveyard means that there isn't the food there for jumping these frogs.
I do like... Oh, Consign again. Oh yeah, he was holding up that Consign. You're right.
Consign,
stopping the trigger.
Yeah, not kicked. Just hitting the trigger, not the creature itself. And then with a fetch land here for Gia, there's now 2 cards in the graveyard. 1 more and we can jump over one of these frogs.
Yeah, right. So, unfortunately that Joe wasn't able to get those tokens because they'll be really good blockers for this frog, right?
And if they weren't required to block, then they would contribute to casting the Emrakul on the following turn.
That is true, that is true.
We see a fetch land here and a handshake. I love the Marsh Flats sacrifice. Okay, I concede. Marsh Flats for lethal.
Yep. Oh, wow. That was a game. That was definitely a game back and forth, though. All right. We'll go ahead and bring it back to the booth.
Welcome back here. Regional Championship number 8 here in Sydney, Australia. Modern format, 155 players. A lot of them playing Breach, a lot of them playing Eldrazi, some of them playing Titan, some of them playing Boris Energy, some Orzhov Blink in the room. A lot of decks we still haven't actually seen yet as well. We haven't featured a Breach deck, we haven't featured an Orzhov deck.
There's a lot of Breach in the room. I've been walking around. I'm seeing lots of Tamios, lots of grinding stations. So I'm sure there's going to be some Breach in the future rounds. But we just wanted to see some of the other decks that are doing well. You know, all these players are doing really well. They're getting up in the ranks. So good to see. I love watching a little bit of a Esper mid-range. You know, it's just people always just, doing their response, and analyzing the decks that are in play.
And Gia now 3-0.
3-0.
So a couple more wins, and perhaps we'll be talking about seeing him in the top 8 tomorrow. Can't get ahead of ourselves, though. As for now, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back for round 3.
Pretty excited. Thanks.